Hello and welcome to Wednesday webinar. This is the second in our series of webinars on estate planning. Now last week I probably horrified you. There is a lot in it, but it's worth it unless you want the tax office to be a major beneficiary of your estate. Now today we're going to talk about the various strategies you can use in organising how to distribute your assets amongst your heirs. The first problem is your capital loss will die with you. So you need to consider if you have a reasonable sized capital loss, that maybe there's some assets you can sell before you die to use up that loss. But if there's going to be a huge capital gain left over after you've done that, it might not be worth it. And if your heirs intend keeping the assets, then why sell them up and have any tax liability anyway? Now, leaving shares and overseas property to an heir that is living overseas will trigger CGT, but not by leaving them an Australian property. So if your heir is a non-resident of Australia for tax purposes at the time you die, then any shares you leave them or overseas property you leave them is considered to a sale by the estate and taxed accordingly. But with Australian property, because Australia continues to have the right to tax the property, then it's not triggered, a capital gains tax event is not triggered in the event of your death. It is just rolled over to your heirs. Now there are some fine lines about not commonly held shares, shares that aren't listed on the market, share market and all that sort of stuff. There's a fine line about those. I won't go into that here. I don't want to bog you down in that sort of stuff and lose you. Now you might think that none of your heirs are going to be overseas, but it's common these days for people to go overseas and get work experience. If they go over there for a couple of years and set up a home over there, not just travelling, then they will be considered a non-resident of Australia for tax purposes. And if they're a non-resident of Australia for tax purposes on the day you die, this becomes a problem. So looking at your heirs, if you want to divvy up your estate to certain heirs, get certain assets, if you think there's a risk they're going to be overseas, don't leave them overseas properties or shares. Third point is give your executor flexibility to choose whether to sell the property or transfer it to your heirs. As you can see, with just discussing if your heirs were overseas or not, it gets complicated, and you can't just right now for what might be the case in 10 years' time. So the best flexibility you can. See, the idea is that your estate will, for the first 3 tax returns after you die, get taxed as if it was as you were, so to get the tax-free threshold. It won't have to pay Medicare levy or the surcharge, but it will get the tax-free threshold. So there's a possibility, if you have an heir that is going to sell a property that they inherit, and if they are in a decent sized tax bracket, it may be better for the estate to sell it and pay the tax, rather than they sell it and they'll have other wages income which will push them up above the tax-free threshold, which might not be the case in the estate. But again, it depends at what stage the estate's at. Towards the end of organising the estate, the heir could end up being taxable on that income anyway. So you just need to give your executor as much flexibility as possible and get them to get advice. The thing you can do the most to help is point 4. Keep good records and regularly update your will as your heirs' circumstances change. So record keeping. This is a huge job. It involves keeping a list of all your assets, a separate file for each asset, scan all the receipts in relation to it, anything to do with the property, put it in there, put it in a spreadsheet, have a running balance, check regularly how much capital gain is sitting there for your heirs to receive, and you might adjust your will accordingly to give it to low or high income earning heirs, depending on the circumstances or the capital gain in that property at the time. For example, if a couple of years ago you had a Sydney property that hadn't had much gain and now it's doubled in value, and you might change who gets that, or you might have an heir who has retired And so gone from your highest earning heir to the lowest earning heir. Also, the reason I want you to keep records, and this is probably the most important thing, the most important point I want to make at this seminar, it is going to be impossible for your executors and your heirs to work out the cost base on assets. Refer to last week's for more details on cost base. It's going to be impossible for them to work it out after your death. Please, I know you think it's painful, but imagine how painful it will be for your heirs. And if you don't do it, the taxman's rubbing his hands together. Okay. All right. Point 4, match the property capital gain to the heir's tax bracket. Now, I think I've already discussed that. And again, this changes. Give your executor flexibility and maybe update your will regularly and keep that running balance on your spreadsheet that's keeping track of the cost base so that you can see how much capital gain is in each asset. This may sound overwhelming. Please do it. Please plan carefully and consult your accountant, because your solicitor is not an expert in capital gains tax. They're an expert in planning and protecting your assets in your estate. I hope that you leave enough cash that you can even up the distribution between your children to make up for the fact that some will get more capital gains tax liability in their inheritance than others will. But most of all, I hope you spend it all, have a great time, and leave nothing. Probably solve a lot of record keeping problems. Thank you for staying till the end, and next week let's hope we have a more upbeat topic. Good night.